welcome to PA Timber Goose. Today is May 14th, a very steamy Saturday afternoon. The sun's going in and out. I'm not sure if I'm going to get rained on today. First Creek is flowing by over there. It's a little high. Very peaceful here. I'm sitting in front of Victoria Iron Furnace. A very historic piece back there. It's stood the test of time. I would love to know the history of the people that built it and ran it. Just like our own family history, it fades away a little bit more each day unless it's passed on through the generations. Most people weren't really sure what countries their family came from. I know pretty much where ours came from. Most of the old people, they had a family Bible, and it was usually pretty thick. And the family Bible was a history book for the entire family. It had the marriages, where everybody came from, what country, who married who, how many children were born, and what year everybody passed away. That was your family log book of both sides of the family. My mother's side of the family, some of the men came from Oslo, Norway. My great-grandmother, I believe she came from somewhere in Germany. My dad's family, they pretty much all came from Northern Ireland, so they were all Irish. So I'm a mixture of Swedish, German, and Irish descendants. Most of the history I know about it would be on my mother's side, thanks to my grandmother. She actually shared a lot of it with us. Unfortunately, on my dad's side of the family, his father passed away while he was still young. So most of that history I'm not sure about. My grandmother's family, when they came through Ellis Island, they headed for South Dakota. And after spending a few winters there, it was way too cold for them. So they all came back to the east. And I believe most of her family ended up in Pottsville. Some of them ended up moving down to Montgomery County. So that's where most of those were from. My dad's side of the family, they were all basically farmers. They kind of stayed in the area. What's the difference between a homesteader and off-gridder? An off-gridder has no power or electric lines, but they still have solar power, running water. A lot of that is solar or wind power. And generally they usually work one line with a Wi-Fi signal. That's how they make money. A homesteader, basically they were farmers. They lived off the land. They raised chickens and cows, pigs, different various jobs on the side to pay the bills. Both of my parents grew up in a house with no running water or electric. There was usually a privy outside, which if you're not sure what a privy is, I didn't. When I was young, till somebody actually told me what it was. A privy is an outhouse, and they would dig an outhouse hole, sometimes a 2 or 3 hole outhouse, and that would take care of your family. When it filled up, you dug another one and moved it, and filled that hole back in. Something my dad's told me many times about doing. I kind of laughed when he said that, but fortunately that's how they lived. The water came from a hand pump, which usually was somewhere on the property. My dad said the farmhouse he lived in along the Brandywine, the pump was actually in the kitchen, in the sink, and that's how they got their water. But that's how and then besides the hand pump, how did they cook? They usually had some kind of a cook stove, and they burned wood, charcoal, or coal. That was how they cooked their dinner. You can imagine how hot that was in the summer when it was 100 degrees. That's why a lot of the old homesteads you see outdoor ovens with a roof over it. It was much cooler. Instead of cooking inside where it was probably past 100 degrees. It's very peaceful here. I always wondered what it would be like living in the old days. The lifespan of most people were a lot shorter. Usually you got taken out with a very simple infection or a cold. There were a lot of the diseases that came around would take you out. Unlike today where we have a cure for almost everything. We have a pill for almost everything, where back then you would just pass away. Families are much larger back then. 10 or 12 or 14 was very common. My dad's side of the family, his grandmother was one of 12 or 14, I believe. And my mother's side, I think she was one of 5. And my grandmother and grandfather, I'm not sure how many they have. My grandmother, she was the only child. My grandfather, I think there was 2 or 3 brothers. They all kind of looked the same. So some odd jobs that my grandfather used to do that he told me about. He actually owned an ice business. He never had a refrigerator. They actually had an ice box. What an ice box was, it was like a refrigerator, but it was made out of plywood, and in the bottom you had a giant block of ice. So in the wintertime, they would go to a lake and they would cut the ice and they would stack it up in the ice house. It took a lot of manpower to do that. They had big tongs once they cut it, and then it had to be drug off the lake and stored in the ice house. They would put a layer of cut blocks of ice, and then they would put sawdust on top of it, and they would keep stacking it all the way up to the ceiling. So it would stay about 20 or 30 degrees in there, and that ice would last all the way to the next year when the next big freeze came, and then they would fill it up again. Pretty amazing for being old school technology, sawdust and an ice house built in the ground. But it worked, and his business lasted till the refrigerator came out, and then his business kind of went away. There was no need for the delivering blocks of ice to the ice boxes anymore. Another odd job he told me about, he was on a dynamite crew when they were building a lot of the roads. He would drill holes in the rocks, and he would be part of the dynamite guys. He would fill the holes full of dynamite and blow them out. Every person building the road had their task, and that's what he did. After that, I'm not sure what he did for a living. Just before he retired, he worked for a production company, a local production company down in Montgomery County. Some of the jobs my father had, he worked for a Girl Scout camp at one point in time. 25 cents a day, and he had to ride his bike from his house to the Girl Scout camp, which is about 5 miles each way. It's starting to rain on me. Hopefully that's just a cloud going by. So he worked at a Girl Scout camp. He also worked at the local church. He mowed the grass at the church, kept the church nice, painted, took care of it, and he was also the grave digger. One of the grave diggers. And when somebody would pass away, he would get 50 cents a hole. The grave had to be a certain length, width, and depth, and the walls had to be straight down. So when I got to the bottom, he would put a ladder in, climb out of it. And I'm not sure too many people would do that today for 50 cents a hole. And another odd job he did was deliver coal for a lot of years. And most homes had a coal chute. He would back the truck up and he would shovel the coal into the chute, and it would go down into the basement, into the bin. And that was another job that he had. Times were different back then. The community was a lot stronger. Everybody went to church every week. The only entertainment basically was playing outside or playing games inside. No TV. My dad tells me quite a few times he would sit around the radio with his family, and they would listen to the Long Ranger on the radio, and the Green Hornet, and a few other shows that were on. I just can't imagine anybody doing that now, but you can always share some family history of your own. Feel free to leave some comments for me. Share some thoughts on that. Are we better off where we're at now, or was it better off long ago when things are much simpler and everybody spent more time together instead of out doing their own thing? Texting is not all it's cracked up to be. It's a little different. Back in the 80s or 90s, we had no cell phone, so you actually had to call each other or leave a message on the machine. You could actually hear somebody's voice. Respond to that text whenever you wanted to, or you could read it whenever you want to. Unlike when your phone rang, you actually had to talk to that person, or they would keep calling you back till you answered. And if you didn't answer, they would come over to see if you were okay. Better times in the past. I am a product of the 80s, and a lot of times I wish we could go back to the 80s. Life was a lot simpler then. Everybody knew everybody in the area that we lived. Nobody was shooting each other, and the world was a safer place. So thanks for watching PA Timber Ghost. Let me know about your comments and thoughts. As always, like, share, and subscribe. Leave some comments, and we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching PA Timber Ghost.